Hello and welcome to episode 146 called Scratchcard Lanyard. Very interesting title from a new British man, which honestly Tony and I had not heard of, but it was an interesting choice. My name is Dr. KK and I'm the Innovation Officer at Inago, and Tony will explain why we chose the song and what PubShorts is all about.
It's made me realize that I should be reading the music press more than I do. I've stopped reading music press, music papers for a long time ago, so I'm completely losing track. But when we think about these episodes and the themes for this episode, we try and associate the episodes with songs. And this particular episode is called Scratchcard Lanyard. I can't even say it myself, which is by a band up until now I'd not really heard of, called Dry Cleaning. The song comes about 3 or 4 years old, and the song has a deadpan delivery which kind of fits this episode, which is around scratching beneath the surface, retractions, paper mills, bullying, editorial bullying,
Yep.
and undisclosed ties and associations within research
Right.
mechanisms.
Right. So a lot of potential, like I guess, research integrity concerns together in this episode. So let's start with one. It's a commentary on editorial bullying. Interesting. So Tony, I think we have talked about editorial bullying overall. So this article discusses how coercive citation is a form of editorial misconduct. It happens when authors are forced to cite work by an editor to get their own work published. So we are aware of many different types of research integrity issues. So this author recounts an experience when a submission was rejected because they refused to mandatorily cite a guideline authored by the editor-in-chief. Seems a little petty. This practice raises ethical concerns, and this forced citation can artificially inflate citation metrics and distort impact factors. Citation could be based on relevance, should be based on relevance, on not on editorial demands, and established reporting frameworks like the Consort and the Prisma are widely accepted due to community consensus and voluntary adoption, not because somebody is forcing them. So this coercive citation is a subtle consequential mechanism of editorial bullying, is the argument made in the paper, and the author suggests explicit policies against self-citation demanded by the editors. What are your thoughts on it?
Oh, this is a difficult one, isn't it? Because on the one hand, you want to be able to, in the peer review process, the reviewer to come up and say, look, have you considered this reference as supporting or arguing against your theories? And you want to be able to sort of come up with ideas and recommendations and suggestions. On the other hand, it should not be a mechanism for editors to promote themselves. It should be, what can I do to help make this article, as if it's going to be published, if it's going to be published in my journal, what can we do to make this article as good as journal? What references are missing? And not about making sure that their own papers are being cited. And there are going to be exceptions if the editor-in-chief is a world-renowned author, he or she, and they've published guidelines which are kind of landmark guidelines for a particular piece of research or methodology, or whatever, or treatment, then yeah, of course they're going to be taken into account. But if that's the case, then the editor-in-chief needs to exclude themselves from the decision, final decision about the journal.
Very important
if their
point.
references are being included.
Yeah, very important point. That's this point. I think it has been highlighted, maybe not in this paper, but the fact that if suppose there is a potential conflict of interest between an editor and a paper, then maybe another editor should be deciding. Similar to peer review as well.
And it happens a lot. Some of these research communities are very small communities, so the likelihood is that you're going to have either have competing researchers who are going to be doing everything they can to undermine their colleagues' research, I suppose, or you can have editors who may favour themselves over others. So there has to be some kind of fairness.
The main point is conflict of interest. Thanks for pointing that out.
Yeah.
All right. So moving on to another interesting. It is from the conversation when science discourages correction, how publishers profit from mistakes. Remember that these are all opinion pieces. So this is not our opinion. We are just discussing the points discuss. So this article, the writer of the article says that the publishing system often prioritizes profit and prestige over accuracy, and allowing scientific errors to persist and continue to mislead. So there are some examples given from a couple of journals with misidentifying satellite data on palm oil yields, and there's another example from a Nature paper as well. So both of these flawed papers pass peer review in high impact journals, as for example Nature, demonstrating systemic issues. And the reasons for slow corrections, the system rewards novelty over accuracy. Now that's a very contentious point, because after all, we've all been told, we've sort of like internalized that novelty is the most important thing over anything else when you are submitting a manuscript and when a journal is considering accepting a manuscript. So, but what is the consequence of that is that accuracy often is sidelined, and flawed data have serious consequences, like for example medical decision making in the context of hydroxychloroquine, in the context of, let's say, early COVID research. And this current model, Tony, I mean, this is something I've been meaning to talk to you, is rooted in Robert Maxwell's 1960s strategy, Pergamon Press, and relies on unpaid academic labor. I think it is also questioning the peer reviewer pay in this case. So there are lots of examples mentioned and publishers mentioned. This is, I know, I'm aware that it's a very contentious topic, and I want to know your thoughts on it in terms of like the profit making versus, what the publishers and journals are supposed to, being sort of gatekeepers of scientific knowledge and quality. What are your thoughts? Putting you on
Let's be fair. Let's be honest about this. The reason why big publishers are so successful is because they are successful at adhering to the rules and providing high quality content on a consistent basis that meets the needs of their researchers. And I must admit, I take the kind of the thing that novelty always comes first with a bit of pinch of salt, because researchers will consistently present novel papers which will get rejected because they're novel, because they're rubbish, because they add no value to the scientific thinking in many cases, so that the findings cannot be supported. And I refuse to accept that a journal as prestigious as Nature is doing this specifically for the money. They're not doing this for money. They're doing this to show the very best science in their particular fields. So no, I think,
No,
I'm not sure I agree with the author in this particular case.
Right. I think the author is also not saying that a journal or a publisher is doing it. They're pointing out the systemic flaws, that these kind of things should have been picked up by peer review, and obviously there would be slips. And even if they're picked up, it takes a long time for things to correct. And
oh yeah, okay. From that perspective, absolutely right. I'm not thinking it too specifically there.
Yeah.
There are things that all publishers can do to identify flawed papers in the more quickly than they do.
Right.
And for retraction not to take a year or 2 years or 3 years to come up. So no, I think if publishers can do that and identify things like images that have been manipulated or flawed data more quickly, then they should be removing those articles more quickly than they do.
So a quick sort of a question that I would like to ask you. So you obviously have been in conversations with publishers regarding identification of potential flaws in articles, and we have products for it, including image manipulation detection as well. So could you speak about it, and what is the current sort of industry demand for such services?
What, specifically image manipulation?
As well as, let's say, research integrity, let's say quality checks and everything, screening.
Yeah, again, tools that will help publishers to manage their research integrity process in terms of ensuring there is integrity in the research are coming up, are more and more prevalent. We're seeing more and more requests from publishers to provide tools that will not just check for the content itself. Has it met all the sort of the structural requirements? Does it, is the language good enough?
Right.
Are you referencing the right articles? But also, is the data sound? Are there ethical issues around the content as well? And that's not just journal content, preprint providers, conference providers. They're all looking at ways to ensure that what the reader is reading, what the researcher is seeing in the content is of value, will actually add to the state of knowledge. And I think you're going to see in the next, I reckon even within the next 3 years, every single publisher that's producing research content will have tools in place that will do the sort of research integrity checks that that are needed
Yeah,
at,
yeah.
at an automated level, and but hopefully identify papers that have got flaws, have been with image manipulation, etc., more quickly than they currently do.
Right. And if suppose somebody is interested in knowing what kind of services that we offer in terms of, let's say, screening and research integrity as well as image manipulation services, so where would they find the information, Tony?
Oh yeah, just well, the first protocol would be to look at Inago reports, which is our screening tool, which has something like 150 different checks available for any kind, not just for peer review, for typical traditional peer review content, but also non-peer review content. So with preprints, conferences, books, for example, if you need to have screening for that content, and we've got tools that will help do that in Inago reports. So it's just go to the Inago reports website, just search Inago reports on Google, and it'll take you directly to that page.
And image manipulation services are also a part of the services that we offer. You want to add to it?
Well, we have a sort of screening level for image manipulation services. So a publisher can use the traditional tools that are out there, like Proofig, Image Twin, etc. And we have second level checkers who will then go in and verify and validate whether those findings are correct.
Yeah. All right. Moving on to the next story, we have. It is related to research integrity and including picking up signals from social media, which is something I think James Butcher was critical about. But let's take a look at what the article is. It's a news article from Nature, and my mouse has stopped moving. The critical social media post linked to retractions of scientific papers. So basically, in this research they looked at whether criticism about the flaws in a manuscript were already present on Twitter, as far as I remember, and would they be sort of signaling that there is something wrong with the paper. So there are two studies that highlighted that the problematic articles often gain significant traction on social media before they are formally retracted. One study found that nearly 1 in 12% retracted articles could have been triggered for closer publication scrutiny based on the critical social media posts themselves. And the research defined critical tweets as those containing sarcasm, criticism, accusations, or doubt. And another analysis reported whether tweet sentiment or specific red flag words would be used. And obviously, negative sentiment was found to be correlational. So the argument I think that James made in Journalology, I think 2 episodes ago, 2 editions before, was that it is too small a signal, like approximately, let's say 8% of such signals were found, if you consider the entire thing. So is it worth it? My argument, Tony, is that any signal that can indicate that there is something, let's say, from a quality point of view or a research integrity point of view, it is a concern, should be used. And there needs to be infrastructure and I guess technology for publishers and journals to sort of use it. And that's the whole point, because the infrastructure and the community needs to support it. So everybody needs to support share signals so that eventually the trust in science can be regained from the society point of view. What are your thoughts? Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, okay, there has to be some kind of screening for social media, of course. But if the social media comments are valid, in the same way that a letter to the editor is considered, or a complaint is considered, or some other communication to the journal or the publication is considered, then yes, of course, it has to be linked and has to be taken into consideration.
Right. A related story from Science. Again, my mouse is misbehaving. So this is a Science article. Nearly 1/3 of social media research has undisclosed ties to industry preprint claims. So this is conflict of interest, not signaling. So this is a preprint. The research was published in these research articles that we are talking about are published in major journals and has been cited extensively. And the authors of these studies may have received funding from social media companies. So it is about social media, the research. So they may have received funding, and that there's a conflict of interest. So industry-linked studies were more likely to focus on how misinformation spreads, and they were less likely to focus on platforms themselves or their algorithms. This suggests a potential bias of the research. So there, in terms of the study methodology as well, there has been bias. So conflict of interest from both sides of the equation. And experts find the high rate of undisclosed ties shocking and unacceptable. So that's about 1/3, right? Social media posts without disclosed conflicts of interest. And that's one of the reasons why conflicts of interest disclosure, as well as the screening mechanism to check whether it has been done and potentially check for conflicts of interest that are sort of, I guess, implicit, which is not explicitly stated in a statement, is also important from a screening point of view. So what are your thoughts on this? Should let's say a publisher be instituting means to check for conflict of interest even if the authors may have not provided it?
Absolutely. That's going to be core in every submission that they receive. If a paper is going to be published, then the reader has to understand whether there are any potential conflicts of interest, and if that conflict of interest includes the fact that a social media company is in some way um, behind or supporting or funding or whatever the relationship is a piece of research, then there needs to be stated up front. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, and there are tools, and I don't advertise our products all the time, but an Argo Reports tool does have a conflict of interest statement. It will check whether conflict of interest statements are being included within a paper. Right. What it doesn't check is whether the author is always telling the truth.
Right.
If they forget to include, or if they don't forget but specifically choose not to include the company that's funding it behind in the paper, then I don't know how you would highlight that, but it needs to be flagged in some way. Right. But we have tools that will identify whether conflict of interest statements exist, and if it's part of the submission process, then you have to include it.
Right, and you can find more about this by searching for Inago reports, and all the information that we have will be available
Absolutely.
to you. And if you're interested, reach out to Tony, who will be happy to walk you through.
Absolutely, yeah. And so 150 checks is pretty much any kind of check you would need.
Yeah. All right. For the first time in this history, there's an article that is shared by somebody other than you, Tony. Apart from those I discovered, this is shared by our for our colleague. I'm not naming names, but it is a BMJ research article, machine learning based screening of potential paper mill publications in cancer research, methodological and cross sectional study. So it was very interesting. So I'm happy that cancer research is a sort of scholarly venue from which this research originates. So this research uses machine learning to identify fraudulent papers in cancer research. The model was trained on papers identified as from paper mills and genuine papers, achieving about 91% accuracy in differentiating, which is excellent. When applied to millions of cancer research papers, it flagged nearly 10%, with a notable increase over time. And papers from the East were disproportionately flagged, but the model also showed a higher false negative rates for Chinese authors, for example, suggesting that it's not just detecting writing style. So the problem isn't confined to low impact journals. A significant number of flagged papers were also from high impact journals as well. So this is, I think, the first time that I'm seeing a machine learning model which has been trained on known paper mill signals. Otherwise, we are looking for other signals, and we ourselves, Inago Reports also has a sort of a signal that can identify based on the occurrence of phrases whether the origin of the article is potentially a paper mill. What are your thoughts on it? Should we shift to machine learning models for identifying this?
I think we should but we should use any tools at our disposal that will highlight bad practice. And if this machine learning model is effective and successful and help identify, papers that are being generated using paper mills, then great. Then we should everyone should use tools like this.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, from the industry, a scientist.
So before we move on, I just an example. The alt metric there. That's an example of how good alternatives are to the impact factor. We were talking about impact factor earlier on. The alt metric. At the end of the day, all researchers care about is who sees this article, what sort of impact does this article have? That makes it so clear.
Yeah, but
so my eye was drawn more towards the altmetric donut than it was on the paper itself.
Perfect. I don't know if you'll find such a colorful donut if you walk into Dunkin's or something. But anyway, so
well, if you see one that color, don't buy it because it's off. Let's move on to
what I was fascinated by for this article, you understand this could have a lot of social media. This could have a lot of purchase on social media. So X users, 58%, 58 of the mentions, 20 Blue Sky, and then 30 news outlets. Very sort of strange this distribution. Anyway, so I was about to segue into the next article. Somebody from the industry, very famous for doing good work, has done some sleuth work. This is from Dorothy Bishop's Bishop blog. As she analyzed 800 highly cited retracted articles published between 2021 and 2025, and she used the problematic paper scanner to check if pub peer comments preceded the annulment. So remember that we just talked about whether sentiment and some words on Twitter or any other social media would predict retraction. So it is similar to that. And she found that 58% of these articles had prior pub peer comments. So pub peer is a community platform where researchers talk about the issues that they find in published peer-reviewed articles. So this was a higher percentage than what Dorothy initially expected. She also looked at the contribution of individual commenters. The top 10 most prolific commenters had contributed to between 9 and 50 articles each, accounting for 27% of retractions in the sample that she looked at. And she also acknowledges that publishers are reluctant to retract articles, which is something that I want to actually pick your brain on, suggesting that high percentage of prior peer comments indicates their importance and the importance of such signals being there. And I think these signals should be harvested or utilized, as you rightly said. Any technology that could inform anybody, publishers, journals, editors, the readers, that there is something amiss with the article should be used. And she recommends that publishers actively monitor PubPeer to help clean up the scientific literature. And she obviously wants to extend this research to not just retracted articles, as in the sense is highly cited retracted articles. She wants to extend to just highly cited articles to see if PubPeer comments are also there. What are your thoughts, and why do you think publishers take so long to retract papers in general? Too many questions for you.
Well, let's take why does it take so long? It takes so long because any malpractice, anything that might construe to lead to a retraction, any evidence that can be displayed doesn't always surface quickly. That's why we said earlier on about if you're you should be using screening tools to identify these potential problems. Has it been generated by paper mill? Are they manipulating images? Are they including flawed data? Are they hallucinated images? There are tools exist today which didn't exist even 3 years ago, 2 years ago probably, that will help publishers to identify this. So there's no reason, or there's less reason, I say, not no reason, but certainly less reason now for retraction to take quite as long as they do. And that's why it takes so long. Sometimes a paper can take, in the old days, it was not unusual for a paper to take a year plus to get through the peer review process, and it might still fail. So then by the time it gets published, it could be like 2 years after the publication, the article was written, before it gets published. I think we're kind of in a what's that? A reflection? Not a reflection point. What do we call it? A point at
inflection point. I think
inflection point. Thank you. So not reflection point. Inflection point, where it may have taken months and years for potentially retracted papers to be identified before, but moving forward, it will be quicker. It won't happen for every single paper. There will still be things that will slip through. But if you can identify these things more quickly, then you should be able to notice them before they're published. And if they get published, there should be sufficient tools and mechanisms in place to be able to retract them quickly once any potential flaws have been highlighted.
Thank you, Tony. And we are ready for quick hits. I don't know. I'm not sure if you are, but this time we have to make it quick. All right, Tony. All right.
Yes.
First of 4, the US is quitting 66 global agencies. What does it mean for science? So organizations like the IPCC, IUCN, and IPBES will be affected. But these organizations, despite the US backing out, will continue to function. And this is described as a loss of financial contribution, but also a messaging of selfishness and the example setting. What I just said is should be considered within quotes. So what do you think? US is pulling out of agencies. We've talked about how US's funding related change from the Trump administration is going to affect research globally. What do you think of this? You have a global perspective on such matters.
I do. I want to go to the US sometimes, so I'm going to be careful what I say. It's a shame, the opinions of the views of trusted US researchers are important in any of these international organizations, and to not be part of that just kind of, for me, is a sad indication of how inward facing, unfortunately, the US is becoming. It's a pity. I hope they'll change their position moving forward.
And we just talked about US funding. So more than so this is a funding story. Another article from Nature Index. More than half of authors of leading research say that funding is declining. So this is over 6,000 researchers who were surveyed. Over half, 53%, believe that funding is for important research projects is decreasing. Only 21% reported an increase in funding. And but this sentiment is global, but particularly strong in North America, where 69% funding declines are seen. trillion, which is what we just talked about it.
Yeah.
I think the
Yeah.
only place that funding is increasing is probably in the East and especially in China. And we are not
Yeah.
surprised. We have talked about it. So I hope that the industry itself and maybe the governments take some measures to sort of stem the sort of migration of the scientific brain to the East. And then there's another China-related story. This is from the Lancet, the rise of China's research, a global opportunity. So R&D expenditure from China has exceeded 520 billion US dollars in 2024, a significant increase, and the scientific output has also increased. So all of this high level of sort of scientific and technological self-reliance is what China is aiming for, and eventually China is hoping for breakthroughs in key technologies and promoting societal benefits. I mean, this is sort of a mirror image of what we just talked about in terms of funding, the positive side of it. China is leaping ahead. Any quick thoughts, considering that our colleagues at Charlesworth cater to the Chinese research market and the publishers who want to have a presence there?
None of this surprises me at all. We've seen sort of pressures, particularly with societies in the US, and reduced funding there, and the impact that's having. And we continue to see the rise of China as a global powerhouse for research.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's the best place to go to do one's research, then you have to follow the money.
Mm-hmm. All right, the last final quick hit we have is from Retraction Watch. Mega journal Helion retracts hundreds of papers after internal audit. So we've talked about Helion as in starting last year, I think, in some of the episodes of PubShorts. So this retraction happened after the internal audit placed on the journal by Clarivate in September 2024 due to content quality concerns. So some interesting numbers, Tony. In 2023, Helion published over 11,000 papers and issued about 24 retractions. Right? 24 in 2024. 1 year later, it published 17,000 papers and had a similar number of retractions. And now, so far in 2026, 37 papers have been retracted and only 144 published, which is incredible. And the percentage of retractions versus how it was changed. So, any thoughts on Helion and that we have been talking about other journals like Curious as well in terms of such things, and Hindawi and all of that. Any thoughts on this? Why do we see such trends? And look at these, I don't know, inexplicable numbers.
I can't speak to the numbers as to why the percentage have increased so much. All I can say is that I hope they're using tools like ours to identify these issues more quickly, and that's why papers are being retracted more quickly, because they're getting better at identifying malpractice and foul play. And I do hope that journals like Helion do get back onto those holes do stop. Because these are journals which are being used, and you can see by impact factors that they are being used actively by researchers. So they're doing all the right things, I think, to be able to demonstrate that the journals are as ethically sound as possible. They've got all the right processes in place, that malpractice has been identified, so that they can continue to be measured and the metrics can appear in the same way as everyone else's.
All right, that brings us to the end of episode 146, Scratchcard Lanyard, and that must mean that we have 145 episodes, and it is the most pleasurable thing that you can conceive of doing over a weekend or a week. I don't know, an entire week. Tony will explain why.
Well, speak for yourself, but it'll certainly come into my top 3. So yes, if you want to view all previous 145 episodes of PubShorts and look at the 145 songs that we've desperately researched to name each of these episodes, as well as, of course, the content itself, you just have to go to YouTube, search for Inago PubShorts. You'll get our playlist with all previous 145 episodes, and an increasing number of shorts and minis and clips that you'll be able to see as well, which will promote PubShorts. And we encourage you to press the like button, share it with your colleagues, send us comments. We love to hear from you, and suggestions for future topics, or what you like and don't like.
Yeah, and Tony, breaking the fourth wall a little bit. Soon in the next few days, we'll be meeting, as in formally for the first time in many years, and we will probably go out, to have a couple of drinks or something. Should we plan to go for a live gig now that we are both in the same location?
No.
Thank you for the wonderful rejection after rejection. And with that, we come to the end of episode 146. We will see you in the next one. Bye-bye, Tony.
Yeah, take care. See you next one.
Bye.